Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice, no sugarcoating, no platitudes, no bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating the same old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. I think for the next couple of weeks, I may be releasing like 3 episodes at a time, not because I'm manic and can't turn my brain off, but because I have such a backlog of recorded episodes. I keep pushing stuff out like that was recorded in January and February, and then re-recording it, and then new shit happens. So I may try some experiments with more episodes. But I came up with the spine of this conversation over this weekend, where I have been reading a great book on Buddhist psychology called The Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield. And I have a lot of insightful moments of self-reflection. Hopefully, if you are reading critical thinking type books, that you are doing a lot of applying and thinking about your life as you read it, instead of just going, that makes sense. What am I going to have for lunch? And so I read a chapter recently that I think felt like personally offensive in the accuracy of how I perceive the world. And it is a chapter about temperament. If you go back a few episodes, I recorded one on what Buddhism calls the 3 poisons, and that is grasping, aversion, and delusion. And I used an example of, at that time, which I'm proud to say I have cut my caseload down, but at that time I was working myself into the ground, seeing about 50, 55 people a week, and I was paying for it terribly in my personal relationships and in my body. So I used the example of those 3 poisons with that I'm trying to build this garage at my house. Boy, I could make an episode all about that and all the interesting things going on with construction and the contractor and cost and everything else. But so about wanting, thinking that once I have this garage built, then I'm finally going to be happy. Aversion being, I don't like waiting, which is why I'm seeing 55 people a week and like killing myself at work. And delusion being, even when I do this, I'm just going to start grasping the next thing, thinking that my happiness is going to be the next goalpost. So that's a little bit of the foundation. Go back a few episodes if you want to hear more on that. But the grasping type moves through the world looking for things that are pleasing, what can be enjoyed, what can be improved. Oh man, that's some Rick Granneman. And what can be made more beautiful. And the deluded type moves through the world with confusion, hesitation. Oh, I didn't realize that I'm obstructing this entire aisle at Walmart because the world just revolves around me. I'm the main character. Oh, I didn't realize that I'm going 35 miles an hour in the passing lane. This is my lane. I think I'm going to live here. The deluded type is kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing here kind of relationship with life. And then there is the aversive temperament, which is where I felt really called out by this book. The aversive temperament is described as being built around judgment and rejection of experience. It finds fault very quickly. Problems are apparent everywhere. This temperament can be critical, quickly displeased, quarrelsome, disparaging, rigid, controlling, angry, aggressive, contemptuous. Now, I'm told that my clients do not experience me this way, which means maybe I'm doing a good job with self-regulation, but this is certainly the internal experience that happens for me often. And at some point I'm going to talk about in this episode, I think what I really like is that this is like a 2,500-year-old philosophy describing human condition that when I was attending AA regularly, it was always kind of off-putting to hear, like, you're like that because you're an alcoholic. You're like that because that's an alcoholic personality. Irritable, restless, discontent. You're just an alcoholic. That's your alcoholism. 5 years sober, people in meetings saying, that's my alcoholism talking. And if that framework is what fits for you, then great, keep doing it. For me, I didn't care for that. I didn't want to go through my entire life calling everything my alcoholism. But this framework makes a heck of a lot more sense for me. So the book describes the physical state of this temperament. Walking quickly, yes. Hard steps, yep. Waking up as if like annoyed, yup. Eating fast, yup. Driving tensely, actually that one I'm doing okay. Getting irritated by other people, yup. Entering a room and immediately seeing the things that are wrong, yup. Guess what? Look at this. This is not your alcoholism. This is something that goes back thousands of years that this conversation was being had. And so I think that's why it was profoundly helpful for me to read it and kind of like a breath of fresh air. But I notice the bad windows, the small kitchen, the stupid layout that, you know, is lacking an open view. And I have a habit where sometimes I can notice flaws before noticing what is good. And so I didn't need to take a personality test after reading that. I knew exactly where I landed. And the uncomfortable part is that I'm not hallucinating these problems. That's where this is a little bit complicated, because those things absolutely do exist. That is not my cognitive distortion looking only for the negative. Sometimes these are things that are right in your face. And so sometimes when people are talking about judgment, they act like everything is like projection, as if the world is just neutral and that I am walking around sprinkling contempt on everything. But like when I go outside, I see a lot of people doing really dumb shit right in front of me. So I try to look at this honestly, and I try to figure out where accurate perception ends and where aversion is feeding itself. Now, so it's July 7th. A few nights ago, we were walking back from fireworks on the beach. There must have been 1,000, maybe 2,000 people funneling off the beach at the same time. And it was a mass of slow walking, wandering, blocking, stopping, drifting, meandering bodies. People were walking 4 and 6 wide like they were in a parade. They were stopping in the middle of the flow because someone needed to adjust a sandal or take another picture or saw a shell in the sand. Maybe like people deciding that they're going to have a family meeting on the only walking access point, like between the beach and like right on the boardwalk. And sometimes I feel like I am like trapped inside of human erosion. And I didn't even have any place to be, which somehow made it more psychologically interesting, because it's not like I'm like late for a surgery. I didn't have a flight that I needed to catch. I was just simply stuck at a pace that felt like I was being dragged across concrete face first. And eventually, I actually walked out into traffic in the street, because at least there was movement in the street instead of people that they felt like they were maybe going like a half a mile an hour on the sidewalk. Now, I'm not like reckless. I'm not jumping in front of cars, but I had to get out of this human sludge. And so I don't understand why my brain is like that, because the distress was not out of inconvenience. It felt like my finite life was being dragged and wasted at the speed of somebody else's obliviousness, which maybe that sounds dramatic to you until you start to notice how often public life can create that exact feeling. So I thought a little bit more about this, and I'm like, this is not a July 4th experience for Brian. This happens at airports, cruises, every time I go to Walmart, public pools, beach events, even AA meetings. If you get enough people together and the average level of spatial awareness drops, this is like commonplace. So I thought about 4th of July. I'm sitting on the beach with my partner, and so there's somebody that has like a 400-watt boom box, as if every person on the beach, every family, child, older adult, tired person within 100 years came there to hear Bad Bunny rap about all the girls that he's having sex with. Some guy is smoking a stogie while playing catch with his kid. Now, normally this would seem like a cute father-son thing, but like spatial awareness, it's like people have to jump out of the way because of where the ball is getting thrown. Everybody on the beach is a TikTok influencer turning a public sunset into a private photo shoot with their deuces and duck lips. And I'm just watching all of it and thinking, oh my God. And if I just pause and notice, sometimes I feel like disgust when I see all of this. And that's a harsh word to use, but sometimes I'm like, how can I be the only person that sees all of this? Like, am I going to become the bitter guy in the woods that's muttering about humanity? And I can see how contempt can become a personality. And I can see how, man, there's a lot of inconsiderate people here can turn into people are fucking disgusting. And when that switch happens, public life stops feeling like a shared space, and it can start to feel like contamination. So this Buddhist text gives a way to hold this that doesn't ask you to erase that temperament. Here's another AA failure, in my opinion, is when you call everything a fucking character defect and you try to shame everything away, like, don't you see that you're the problem? That is not going to be helpful to a lot of people. So the author in this framework says the temperament, like internal family systems work, is you have to try to understand it, work with it, and transform it. And human beings come with distinct styles, whether you want to call that karma or genetics, conditioning, family systems, trauma, or nervous system wiring. The goal is not to throw away your personality and become a calm little monk with a soft voice and an inspirational Instagram page. The goal is to distinguish the gold of your natural temperament with all of the unhealthy states that can cover it. And I think that spoke to me because I don't have any interest in becoming some fake version of peaceful. I see that game where people imitate their teachers, they copy other people's clothes, voice, gestures, diet, vocabulary, serene posture, and they try to become somebody else because maybe they're tired of themselves. The book talks about that too. Students in Buddhist communities imitate their teachers, trying to get rid of their own confusion, fear, anger, and personality by becoming somebody that they admire. So it certainly makes sense. I understand that temptation. I also know that it would fail. My temperament is not ever going to be slow walking vacation guy that is like bending over in the access aisle where nobody can pass so that I can tie my shoe. My temperament is never going to become cruise buffet serenity guy. My temperament is never going to be the guy who floats through Walmart at Christmas with love towards every chaotic stranger. So what do I actually have? And that's where this chapter gets interesting. It describes a teacher in a monastery who helps people transform by using their existing temperament, even kind of ugly ones, but rather than shaming them about character defects, he finds a way to make those things useful. So he uses an example of a really boastful builder who comes to the monastery very full of himself, talking about all of the houses and projects that he has built. And so the teacher gives him a major project at the monastery. And if you succeed, then great, you've learned how to work with others and to contribute to something beautiful. And if you fail, that's a lesson too. He has another example of a boxer who's a real tough guy that becomes a monk after his mom dies. And even though this teacher does not need a bodyguard, he's a peacemaker, he gives this tough guy the role of being my bodyguard, even though he doesn't need one. And it gives him a way to transform aggression into dignity. He uses another example of an alcoholic who sneaks out of the monastery multiple times, and rather than trying to have the guy just rely on a vow alone, he gathers all of the person's friends and places him in their care and sees the pattern and redirects the energy. So I think that this is very sharp, because you don't take a builder's pride and pretend it doesn't exist. You give it a task. You don't take a boxer's aggression and then give him a lecture about how he needs to be more kind and how his character defects are getting in the way. You give the aggression a dignified role close enough to compassion that it can start to learn. You don't treat an alcoholic monk's charm and community as irrelevant. You recruit the community as part of the intervention. So the raw material stays recognizable, the expression changes. So then I have to ask what transformed aversion would look like for someone like me, because aversion has gifts. The book says that transformed aversion can become discriminating wisdom, non-conscientiousness, loving kindness, strength, clarity, and willingness to confront problems. It says that aversive types often refuse to tolerate mediocrity, yes, or lack of integrity, yes, because they speak truth about problems and they catalyze group energy, and I do respect that, because I will never be a passive blob who just thinks that everything is beautiful because judgment makes somebody uncomfortable. Some things are stupid, some things are selfish, some things are inconsiderate, some things are sloppy. Public spaces do get worse when everyone acts like their private impulse deserves public accommodation. The problem is what happens inside me after I notice those things. Now, I'm going to give you an example of Walmart. It was around Christmas or New Year's, and I don't remember which holiday, because they've got about the same energy. Too many people, too much noise, too much stress, too many carts, and the checkout line was a fucking disaster. It was insane. There was no structure, no barriers, no lines, just a chaotic human snake that was bending through the front of the store. I was super irritated because disorder really bothers me. Lines exist for a reason. Boundaries exist for a reason. A line is a social contract. It says, we are all annoyed. We all want to leave. We don't like this, but we're going to suffer in order. And when people start fucking cutting in, my brain goes nuts. And so This line had the person in front of me had left like a 6-foot gap between them and the people in front of them. I don't know if they thought that we were like in the pandemic again. In a normal line, probably this would have been fine, but in a chaotic Walmart line with no barriers, that gap was an invitation. Other people started cutting in, and I felt this internal rage that came on because I was watching a preventable breakdown of order happen in real time. I was stuck behind people who were either oblivious or passive, and then other people were exploiting that space, and my mind was screaming, close the fucking gap, man. Move forward. This is like basic civilization. And the person in front of me had no shoes on, which also did not help my compassion. And by the time that they got to the register, I had turned this person into a symbol of everything that was wrong with society. And that person learned that Walmart did not take Apple Pay. Now, they had like a photo frame or two and some candy and no way to pay. And what did I do? I paid for my tormentor's photo frame and candy, and I said, Merry Christmas. Inside, I wanted to snap him in half. And that is the whole human problem in one checkout line. Both things were true. The violent internal contempt was present, but the generous behavior was also present. My emotional internal impulse was ugly, but the outward action was decent. DBT would call this opposite action. And I was not wearing like a monk robe. There was no incense. This is where you can see that an internal reaction can be real, but still also trainable. And this is where AA language feels too small for me, because if I heard somebody in a meeting say like, well, that's your alcoholism, like I understand the point that many people with alcoholism are irritable, contemptuous, impatient, have issues forcing their control on everybody. They can be self-centered, entitled. All of that exists in addiction. So for somebody that does not have any other frame, that language, calling everything your alcoholism, can keep that person honest. It can stop an addict from making every ugly pattern sound special, complex, and exempt from accountability. But I will be coming on 7 years sober, and that explanation does not do enough for me. Plenty of people who have never had a drinking problem walk around with this same aversion that I am discussing in this episode, this same disgust, this same intolerance for public stupidity. Now, I've met a handful of clients that really, they need community, and they need other people who are on a similar path, and I will recommend them to AA with some coaching of like letting them know you may hear some language that might be kind of off-putting, and I try to kind of prep them for the possibility of hearing some stuff that doesn't land well, but also kind of softening it with some of these other frameworks that are better parallels. But a lot of people that I recommend them to go to AA, they dislike it for this reason, because they hear every difficult emotion turned into people calling it their alcoholism, or every personality pattern called a defect, or every irritation into like, well, that's your dry drunkenness. And eventually that explanation stops opening anything. It just starts closing things down. For a lot of people, alcohol is a treatment strategy. It's a way of managing this machinery. But the machinery underneath is older and broader than drinking. The real issue here is temperament, conditioning, aversion, control, and the feeling that reality is being badly managed right in front of me. So for me, the pattern is not that I want to drink. I don't ever even think about that anymore. It's not even a freaking thought. The pattern is that I want reality to stop being so poorly managed. And alcohol used to offer a chemical exit from that kind of pressure. Sobriety removes the chemical exit. So now there's no escape hatch. Doesn't mean that there is not pressure there. And this is where I like the Buddhist frame better, because it gives language that is bigger than addiction and more precise than calling everything a character defect. Untransformed aversion. I like that because it names the pattern without reducing your personality to alcoholism. It also keeps the door open for clients who have the same temperament and have never had an addiction history at all. You can be 7 years sober, 20 years sober, never sober, because you never had to be, and you can still be ruled by aversion. So this book has this image of personality as a stubborn and demanding pet. I wrote an article about how sometimes my thinking patterns are very similar to my pit bull, who is ruled by impulse. I should probably record a podcast on that article that I did like a year ago. Anyway, you can train your pet, your demanding little pet, to have better manners, the same way that I train Honey, my pit bull, to sit at her food bowl. Now, I could put food in there and she will attack it with her monster box face. She will just smash her face into that bowl and wolf it all down in 3 seconds. And I usually, instead, I put the food in there and then I make her sit there and wait. Not because I'm trying to torture her, but because it's good for helping her develop her prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of her brain that goes, there is a gap between my impulse and my action. Even dogs can do it. We humans can do it as well. So I like this, that you can train this personality to have better manners, but for the rest of its life, that stubborn, demanding pet personality, you don't shame it away, you don't character defect it away. It will need affection, food, and water, and it removes a fantasy of like a total personality transplant. My pet walks fast, it scans for flaws, it hates people blocking the fucking aisle, it hates bad systems, it hates passive line management, public noise, and people who act like nobody else exists. My pet gets irritated very quickly, and my job is to train the pet. My job is getting my aversion to serve clarity rather than contempt. And there's also a story in this book about a Zen teacher who describes herself as an aversive type, that when she travels, she complains about the airport, the food, the climate, the body discomfort, how stupid people are in the TSA line. I love this. I love that kind of honesty, because it's like, it makes me think like, thank God I'm not alone with this kind of thinking. And then she catches herself in all of this and she goes, I'm having an attack. Like, not an anxiety attack, but like I'm having a spell right now where I am under attack or under siege with my thinking that I'm hating this airport, or telling myself I'm never going to travel again. Of course, it's not true. I'm going to be traveling again next month, and I'm going to complain just as much. And then she laughs at herself, and it's not fake positivity. It's disidentification, because she sees the airport very clearly as stupid. And then she also sees her mind doing this aversion routine. And that small bit of humor can create a pressure valve. It can create some space. Now, before reading this book, my partner often will say something similar to this, which I had learned from a sponsor in AA. So this is not like Brian shits on AA, but that when I would get irritated by stuff, like somebody blocking an entire aisle at Walmart that I cannot get around them, my partner will sometimes look at me. He'll see the frustration or the disgust on my face, and then he'll go, doesn't she fucking know that this is your aisle? And then I can laugh. I can laugh at my own thinking and go, yeah, yeah, right. Doesn't she know? I guess I'll have to turn my card around. And I can redirect the thinking that fast, but it doesn't mean that I don't still have that first reaction. So without space, without interruption, the first thought or irritation can become like religion, and that's where people can get into trouble. Because like I don't just notice inconsiderate behavior. I have a pattern where I prosecute it. And I've got an episode all about that of me in Lowe's. But I gather exhibits, the beach speaker guy playing Bad Bunny, cigar guy, slow walkers, Walmart barefoot Apple Pay guy, somebody who has global entry yet has somehow like never figured out how to go through airport security, parents at a public pool, people on cruise ships, influencer, sunset people. The list goes on. The case keeps building. Each new example confirms a worldview, and eventually, Brian's courtroom never adjourns. It is a 24-hour prosecutorial, bring him in here, let's find him guilty. And that kind of contempt can feel good short term. That's the dangerous part, is that it feels clean, it feels intelligent, morally clarifying. Feel like I'm the only one that is awake in a world of people that are sleepwalking through shared space. And then the cost shows up. Contempt makes the nervous system live in a hostile environment where nobody is even directly harming me, yet somehow every ordinary inconvenience is evidence of civilizational collapse, and that can turn people into categories before they even get to be people. So this text says aversive types can discount real virtues because they are so focused on faults. And that really lands, because that guy with that cigar at the beach, he may have been an inconsiderate beach neighbor momentarily, but at the same time, he was a dad playing catch with his son, and that is kind of cool. The person with the duck lips, taking sunset photos, grabbing the sun or doing whatever or shaking their ass, ridiculous in my viewpoint, but potentially that person may have been having like one of the best nights of their vacation, where they're going to return to a very hard life. I don't know. Barefoot Walmart guy, probably disorganized, broke, embarrassed, tired, limited, distracted, or simply operating with a level of executive functioning that makes me want to chew glass. Slow walkers might be oblivious or old, injured, recovering from surgery. The point is, my brain fills in a lot and tells me a lot of stories that feed this contempt that cannot that is not helpful for me, and so that does not make seeing any of this behavior enjoyable, but noticing all of that keeps my mind from turning them into like trash. And that distinction is where the work is, because when my first irritated response or reaction internally is people disgust me, I'm usually reacting to a pattern, but I'm also collapsing that person into the behavior that irritated me. The collapse there is poison, because the person becomes their worst public moment. And if I'm honest, I would not ever want to be judged that way. I wouldn't want somebody to take my worst internal stance and then make that an identity about me. I wouldn't want for me to have my head up my ass and then someone decide that that was the whole truth of who I was as a person. So healthy aversion, I think, has to look different. Healthy aversion can see a problem, name it cleanly, take action when action is useful. And so Sometimes you see that Walmart is crazy, you pop your head in there, and then you go, nope, this is a bad day for me to shop here. Sometimes it is saying a hard thing if a hard thing is needed. It is about protecting your time, attention, energy, and integrity. So that does not mean that you have to normalize mediocrity. It allows you to say, wow, a lot of selfish people here today, and then for me to move my chair. Unhealthy aversion keeps chewing. It follows me home. It becomes a monologue. It becomes disgust. It becomes the emotional equivalent of smoking the cigar myself and blowing it into my own lungs. Like one thing that they say in AA is it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So the practice might be brutally simple: accurate perception, wise action, no after party. I can see the speaker and I can move. I see the slow walkers and I can go around them. I see the line, chaos, and I can go, I don't think this is a good day for me to be at Walmart. Or I can close the gap or say, hey, can you please move forward a little bit? I can put earbuds in and conserve my energy. I can see when my own contempt is arising, and then I can name it like that woman did and say, aversion attack. And then that stops making the entire species stand trial. Okay, if the mic sounds weird, I did record that first part at like 7 a.m. and now it's 6 p.m. So if I sound different, tired, you're hearing it correctly. Anyway, I'm about halfway through there. Sorry for the interruption. So I left off with aversion attack and having humanity have to stand trial. Obviously, that last part is hard because part of me believes that if I am not upset in situations like this, then I'm giving people a pass. And that is clearly a trap, because confusing internal outrage with moral accountability, as if my disgust is somehow holding the line for civilization, that is a dangerous place for a person to be. Meanwhile, the guy with the speaker, he is just Bad Bunnying the 4th of July all day and having a great day. He doesn't even know I exist. The influencer got dozens of sunset pictures and she looks like a model. The slow walkers made it back to their car. Walmart guy has his frame and candy and doesn't even remember my disgruntled face in the line. I'm the only one carrying the residue in any of that. And that is where Buddhism is annoyingly practical, because the question is not whether the world contains fools. Of course it does. The question is whether I want to become one more person who is unconsciously spreading suffering. This is where the idea of transformation helps, because nothing has to be lost. The aversive energy that I have does not have to disappear. It can become clarity. It can become humor. It can become boundaries. It can become better planning. It can become paying extra for quiet. It can become leaving earlier before the mob takes over Fifth Ave. It can be choosing the edge of the crowd instead of the center. It can be social commentary on a podcast, therapy, writing, standards. It can even become compassion if I can remember that most people are simply just kind of living in their own little world. I have to sometimes remind myself that people did not wake up in the morning with the intention of ticking me off. And maybe that's the core of public fuckery, is that everybody is living inside their own little movie. The speaker guy on the beach is starring in Beach Party, main character edition. This sunset influencer is starring in Naples Sunset Goddess. The guy at the airport, who this is his first day alive, who has never been through a TSA line, is starring in Why Is This Happening to Me? The Slow Walkers are starring in Vacation Stroll, and apparently I am starring in like Last Competent Man Alive. It's funny until it becomes a prison. So where does that leave me? I think that I am an aversive temperament with some grasping for competence and control because I want things to be orderly and efficient, thoughtful, skillful, fair, and aware. And those are all good values to have, but my sickness enters when I demand that the public conforms before I allow myself to have peace. And like I said, you go to AA, you might hear that framed as that's your alcoholism. This Buddhist lens makes a lot more sense for me. And it's asking something brutal, I think. It asks me to stop making my peace conditional on the end of chaos. You can still have standards, preferences, boundaries, judgment. You can leave the beach early. You can not go to Walmart around Christmas or New Year's. You can not go on a Carnival cruise ship, which is basically a floating Walmart. You can use noise-canceling earbuds, any of those things, so that you have less exposure to human ignorance. I re-recorded that because first I said stupidity, but I think ignorance is a better fit. That's wisdom. And when I inevitably encounter unconscious behavior, I can practice seeing it and naming it without fusing to it. So, aversion is here. Contempt is here. Ooh, my fast-walking, fault-finding pet is barking again. And then I get to decide which action is going to serve best for that situation. Now, that Walmart story hopefully gives some hope that it shows that I am not my contempt, right? Because in this example, I was furious, I was judgmental, I was disgusted, I was aggressive internally. And then I behaved generously, which I am not a saint. It just meant that there was enough space between the internal impulse and my action for me to practice something different. Maybe that is the realistic version of spiritual growth for somebody like me, or maybe like you, because I will never be the person who floats through Walmart just radiating loving kindness toward every barefoot Apple Pay disaster that is around me. But I can become the guy who notices that rage and then keeps my conduct clean, maybe even does something kind or decent, and then laughs at how crazy my mind is. So, that chapter of text says that your temperament is meant to be understood, not eliminated, and I can work with that. You don't have to become a different species. You just have to stop treating aversion as a revelation. Sometimes it's useful information. Sometimes it's an aversion attack. Sometimes it's my old conditioning. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes I am being a drama queen. And often it's all of those things at once. So the question that we are left with is simple and uncomfortable. Can I keep clarity without feeding disgust? Because once I lose clarity, then I become passive and dishonest. And if I feed disgust, then I become hard and alone. And the middle path for an aversive person is probably this: see clearly, act wisely, and then let it go quickly. That's the practice. And if I forget, which I will, which is why I'm practicing doing the work with all the listeners, then I can at least say what that Zen teacher said: I'm having an attack. I hate this airport. I hate this Walmart. I hate this line. I hate this beach. I hate when people are walking like they are escorting a corpse through molasses. And then I can pause, maybe even laugh, and remember that my pet is barking. Train the pet. Don't let it drive. That's doing the work. And that seems like a good place to throw the anchor out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to people around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we're all capable of growing past that. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next one.